In the clearing of clarity, do the patterns of nature suddenly disappear? The symmetries, the trees, the spirals, the meanders, the waves, the foams, the tessellations, cracks and stripes. There are equivalent patterns that make up the sense of self. All things, inner and outer. In the luminosity of lucidity, the superficial appearance of things may not necessarily change. The ego is like a fleeting flame, glowing in the eternal fire of reality. What does the character of the seeming individual flame matter to the fullness of the fire? In the light of love, the illusion of individuality, duality, is seen for what it is, but patterns need not change. They may or may not. The contractions, the limitations, the narrowness within the ego structure soften, loosen, along with the suffering that felt so personal that seemed to define us and limit our potential and our experience of this infinite potential. So now, in this recognition, in this understanding, this lucidity, I'm expressed in these countless ways. All of this seemingly dualistic manifestation is my expression. None of it hinders me. This rich tapestry of life, these benign patterns.
Everything is pure divine light, pure divine Shakti, God in expression. And then we have this program thrown into that that's also the light, but it's like a program within that will then interpret the light in various ways. And then we invest so strongly in these stories and situations and emotions that the ego grips onto. That contracted perspective, that push and pull of desire and fear. Actually, all that's going on there is just pure divine expression of light that everything always was. There's nothing else. There's absolutely nothing else. There's only the flow of the whole thing, this miraculous experience. You can only wear masks for so long before your arms get tired and the mask falls to the floor and you show who you really are. You know, you can make patterns in water. It's still water. It's still the same thing. It just looks different. So even in the midst of like what might seem like a very intense, emotional experience, there's always something in the background kind of smiling. You can get yourself right into the midst of a contracted kind of like horrible bit of turmoil. And if you can just see it for what it is, then that whole thing unravels itself at any point, because it's all made of the one substance. The light prior to the prism that it shines itself through has never left home.
You're listening to the Nonduality podcast. This is Nick Higham from nisargayoga.com, and here with me is Paul Dobson. So this is from Perfect, Brilliant Stillness by David Carse. He says, there seems to be an idea among seekers that after awakening, life presents you with a different set of experiences, and in particular, the experience of emotions flattens out or goes away. But that's not true. What happens when the understanding occurs is not that the range of experience flattens out, but rather something very different. The range of emotion from 0 to 10 is still experienced. It's just that there is now an awareness that the range is not all there is. That range is still felt in its totality, but is seen and felt that the totality is of insignificant amplitude, barely a squiggle on the surface of the infinity of all that is. With the understanding that all is a dream, that there exists nothing other than all that is, you then re-enter the dream. Ego, the sense of an individual self and all its misperceptions, is seen as itself a mistaken perception, as having never existed. Only the sense I am remains, and this is known not to belong to the character, but to presence, which is always, everywhere, perfect brilliance.
Yeah, from the usual perspective that we have as human beings, we chase after the apparent good and we try and push away the so-called sad and bad emotions. Once that perspective is dropped, I mean, you could say it's put in its correct context. All of these experiences are not seen in the same way that, say, an ego perspective might see them. There's not the same investment in them. It's almost like something in the background is smiling and not taking it seriously. It's all imagination, basically. So the second it's believed in, it becomes as if it's real. It's like you're seeing a tiny sliver of reality from that perspective. Like looking through a keyhole into a room, and you can only see a tiny sliver of a room, but that's very different than opening the door and seeing the room in its whole context. This massive, massive, infinite context. So even in the midst of like what might seem like a very intense, emotional experience, there's always something in the background kind of smiling, just going, this isn't serious, despite how it appears. Actually, all that's going on there is just pure divine expression of that same light that everything always was. There's nothing else. There's absolutely nothing else. So it's not that these things go away. They can be fully experienced. In some ways, they're more fully experienced because it's not resisted. It's not even attempted to be resisted. It just is what it is, and it's kind of seen in its perfection. And all of these flavors are kind of seen as beautiful in their own right, really. They're not seen as wrong, I think, is the main thing. They're not seen as wrong or that they should be something other. That contracted ego perspective, that push and pull of the ego, of desire and fear, once that's seen beyond, there's only the flow of the whole thing, this miraculous experience. It's all seen in its kind of perfection. It's put in its correct context. So therefore, it's just totally allowed. Not that it wasn't ever allowed. There's no possibility of it seeming to be not allowed anymore. It just is what it is.
Exactly. The misperception when it comes to the spiritual search is that one day I will reach a point where either I won't feel anything, I won't feel the normal human emotions, or I'll only feel good emotions. Both of those assumptions are only assumptions. Life can go on to experience any, what we call feeling, emotion, thought, energy, experience. There is no censorship, there is no expectation for anything to be different than it already is, because it's not about not experiencing certain things, but discerning the true nature of experience. And as such, experience on the surface can appear any way. It doesn't mean anything in a deeper sense. It certainly doesn't mean anything about you in any way. Every experience is, you could say, impersonal because you intuit exactly what that experience is. It's nothing but that unnameable life that we explore in these conversations. So there's no requirement for anything to change.
Yeah. Basically, there's this happening, whatever that even means. I mean, there's this experiencing fact, and in its rawness, it's just, we could say it's just light. It's pure, everything is pure divine light, pure divine Shakti, just God in expression. And then we have this little kind of program thrown into that. That's also the light, also the Shakti, but it's like a program within that will then interpret the light in various ways, make it appear dark, make it appear wrong, make it appear right, all of the play of duality. And none of it's true. The stories are there. The stories are the light. The stories are absolutely what everything else is. But the stories, when not believed in, are just the light. So it's an incredible program called the ego that's put into the middle of that to make it really seem like there's something going on other than that. Because if there's nothing going on other than pure light, just radiant, amazing, divine God's expression, you could say, just to put some poetic words on it, because it is, there's not enough poetic words for what it actually is. That's just what it is. It's just without any interpretation, it is just what it is. But you throw the ego program in there, and you've got a person, his stories, the full range of emotions, and which ones are good, which ones are bad. So there's one fact here, that we usually refer to as experience.
Yeah. In the Law of One, they repeatedly use the phrase love and light. All is love, all is light. Both work as best as language can to point to a deep truth about reality. So, what is light? Light, especially in the Law of One, is used to mean truth. And what is love? It's the unconditional embrace of every manifestation. So when they refer to love and light, they're suggesting the coming together of the two. What that love and light that is so fundamental to reality create is so powerful. I mean, literally is the power source. Love and light refracts out into all that is known, and it's like that fundamental energy gets encoded, gets programmed, becomes dualized, this kind of binary system of desire and fear. Then you have this experience. Because, and you can check this out for yourself, you won't find a neutral experience. You'll always find some degree of desire and fear. Zeros and ones of yes and no's. Zero, that's the fear factor. And then you've got the one, which means yes, like, yes, I want this. Yes, this, I need this. This will complete me. And then that informs our experience of ourselves as life. As you said, then that narrows our perception, that narrows our seeing of ourselves, and everything becomes very contracted, and our bandwidth is so small. We only have access to a finite range of distorted, watered down qualities. Then we have to kind of micromanage our experience. We lose sight of the fundamental flow of this isness, that fundamental okayness. And with that is so much resistance, so much kind of firefighting. And when that system is deprogrammed, when desires and fears are seen through, so is this perception of this illusion of duality. It isn't actually dualistic, and there is nothing to fear, and you need nothing to complete you. Like a diverse range of experiencing is still possible. But as you say, there's this deeper yes to how all this unfolds.
Yeah, that's it. That's the driving force of everything, isn't it? That deeper yes. That's literally the power that creates universes that you've got just flowing through your whole system at the moment is what you are. Everything's totally taken care of, but it's like you've got this infinite intelligence, and within that you've got this micromanager which seems to have a very limited intelligence and is trying to manage what the infinite intelligence is doing. It's like, no, you're good, buddy. You don't need to do this. It's taken care of. That's that's kind of the part of the joke of that, though, is that, of course, that's part of the infinite intelligence. It's part of the one flow of that source of light and love, as you mentioned. As a kind of sort of an imagination experiment, you just imagine that all there is only light and love. Not knowing yourself as anything other, all you can experience is those inherent qualities of, the bliss and joy of being light and love. There's no confusion, there's no complication to it. So that's what you are. And so there's a desire somewhere within that. It wants to experience itself in every possible way. And it needs to create a kind of chaos within itself. There's fear and pain and up and down and all of the other things that go with that. It's only experience. That is the oneness. It's not a oneness of gluing everything together and making it something different. It's seeing that that's already the case no matter how it appears.
Yeah, it would seem you have a choice. As we've said previously, there is one choice, and that choice is love. It's love or love. It's what feels like a pure expression of love or a distorted expression of love. But the choice is one. The choice is always love. But within that apparent choice, you can choose to explore unconsciously, or you can choose to explore consciously. You are life exploring yourself. Whatever experience you're having now, an experience of the body, the mind, that private sense of self, or what you see around you, what you see of other people, you're exploring all of this. You are literally venturing into yourself, into like space, like an astronaut exploring a different world. So you can explore unconsciously, and that's okay, that's an option, but it's characterized by separation, which is the origin of suffering. Or you can explore consciously, where you are knowingly life in exploration mode through the medium of separation. But it's seen for what it is. You are unplugged. You're like Neo in the Matrix. You can still go back into the Matrix with a different kind of appreciation, and therefore you don't buy into what you used to, you don't buy into the assumptions, and that changes everything. That's what awakening is, really. Awakening or enlightenment is just conscious exploration of yourself. The exploration continues. But the other, you could say the blue pill, unconscious exploration, it's not that there's nothing wrong with that choice. It's just a different mode of exploration. You do have this desire, this drive to see what you can do, see how you can present, see how you can appear. It's like, how distorted can I become? How dense can I feel, and heavy and far removed from truth can I experience myself? Or even just a very benign desire to be I am, to be that I at rest, non-dual, and then to wake up and declare to yourself, I am, I exist. This is that sense of beingness that you know so well, that sense of consciousness. So that's a very subtle mode of exploration. This is why you'll often hear spiritual teachers say, go back to the I am, go back to the I am. To that very simple way of exploring yourself. Even that I am state seeks some kind of shape, some kind of character. And that's okay as well. That's all okay as well. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Ultimately, it does not matter what's attached to that I am. It doesn't matter what you seem to become, just as long as you remember the seeming quality. But even then, even if you forget and you have a different kind of dream and there's loads of fear and desire, a narrow perception of yourself, and it just seems like chaos, like complete disorder and confusion, then yeah, that mode of unconscious exploration is taken care of by you, by that infinite intelligence that you are.
It's got its own kind of force of nature in a kind of almost a self-correcting way, it seems. There's only so much suffering someone will put up with. Like, it's just, you cannot not eventually start looking into it if you keep suffering. The suffering that's a call to inquiry, as Nonduality would say. It's a kind of self-correcting system. So within that, it's like you've got this amazing playground to roam. It's always safe. It's always taken care of. It's always within its own safety of its own playground. And eventually it's got this kind of gravitational pull back to itself. You suffer, and eventually you do start inquiring, like, what am I? Like, what is this suffering? What is going on? Like, you see this a lot with people who have like a divorce or something. They have like a breakdown of some kind, and they really start to lose their identity a bit, and because they've put so much identity into that marriage or whatever else, the house and the kids and stuff, and that's who they are. And then they all leave, and they're like, who am I without these things? The seed is there in situations like that. The seed is definitely there. You can't go through something sort of traumatizing like that, where what you've taken yourself to be is kind of removed from you, like ripped from you like an arm or something, where you don't start wondering, what the hell is this? What is this life even about? And that's kind of the seed, isn't it? And that's quite kind of why I say it seems to be a self-correcting system of some sort, So that in that sense, there's nothing to worry about. Explore. Feel free to roam and explore. Eventually, the gravitational pull of the truth of what you are will bring you back. Truth isn't just like truth versus a lie. It's like the force of what is real, what is actual. You can only wear masks for so long before your arms get tired and the mask falls to the floor and you show who you really are. And that's kind of what this whole situation is, I feel.
Yeah, so you seem to get lost and forget home, forget who you are, become so seemingly, cut off, and then you suffer. And you don't just suffer something, you don't just suffer with a sense of loss or rejection or loneliness. You become the lonely one, you become the one who is rejected. I am the lost one. And there's always a reminder at hand, because that is what suffering is. Suffering is forgetfulness. You suffer because you forget who you are. You forget the truth. You forget what's real. You become attached to what is unreal. There's always a reminder. There's always a portal, an entry point, a doorway back home that will take you back home, so to speak. Every doorway, every portal appears in home. So it's not like you go back. You just remember that you already are home. Yes, there's a feeling of confusion, but just for a moment, leave that where it is, look beyond it and find that which is clear. Okay, so the feeling doesn't feel clear, but what is clear? What is clear? For example, is the space around that feeling of confusion clear? Is the air clear? Is the light clear? Are there parts of your body that feel clear? You will find an expression of clarity or any of the qualities of self. They're always at hand. And you could say resourcing through tapping into or tuning into a different frequency, which then opens the bandwidth or puts you back online. Okay, none of these qualities are absolute. We can't say what the absolute reality is, but it's something like peace, something like joy, something like bliss, something like clarity, and so on.
Yeah, that's a nice way of putting it. Just tuning into a different channel. There are different options in any moment, really. It's all there in every moment. Go back to the law of one. Ra says in one bit, the moment contains love, and I'd actually then say the moment is love. So that's the that's the key, is that there's love here right now. The love that creates universes, that's here, and that amazing force of pure ecstatic creation is here. Find it. There's always a doorway within any experience. You can get yourself right into the midst of a contracted kind of like horrible bit of turmoil. And if you can just see it for what it is, then that whole thing unravels itself at any point, because it's all made of the one substance. You can see it, because the truth is always true. Like, it is always what it is. It can't actually be other than what it is. It can shape itself and play games and do all of the little light tricks that it does, but it never actually becomes anything else. And so that's why there's always a way in. You are everything. Not you as what the person is like an expression of that, but what you are is everything, playing a big puppet show with itself. And it's going, oh, let's really believe in these stories now. And that's how the puppet show seems real. That's the light messing around, pranking itself, to put it lightly, to put it lightheartedly. And sometimes it isn't lighthearted. I understand that. It seems very... I know the full range of suffering. But the moment contains love. Of course it does. It can only contain love. It can only contain love and love distorting itself. But it's still love. You can make patterns in water. It's still water. It's still the same thing. It just looks different. And we've got this kind of interpretive mechanism within that kind of really then believes it really does look to me like that's a separate thing from the love. But it's always here. So you look, you can zoom into the experience. You can zoom into the quality of the experience. You go, I've got this, mental turmoil at the moment. What is it actually? Like, let's really zoom into the experience. Get your microscope of experience microscope out, you could say, and just look into the qualities of that. What is that made of? What is it actually? Not what are the stories about it. What is it actually? What is it made of? Because it's not made of matter or brain stuff or something. It is made of your experience. Well, your experience. It's made of experiential qualities. You can do that. You can zoom into it, and it just becomes. Well, you just never find the end of it. Or you can zoom out and do the kind of netty, as we've said before. And how is it even known? How can it possibly be experienced? The light prior to the prism that it shines itself through has never left home. That is the light prior to the ego prism. That light of awareness, that light of experience that knows that things appear, that even is knowing it's having an experience right now, is prior to that prismic fragmentation. That's why it's sometimes referred to as pure awareness. It's not actually separate from the experience. It's that bit that you've got your one foot left back in heaven, you could say, to put, romantically. You got your 1 foot left back in knowing what you really are. I'm not going to fully enter the game completely lost. I'm going to leave one massive clue, and that's that anything can appear in the game whatsoever. And all you got to do is trace it back to that fact. Okay, I'm experiencing turmoil. What is the experiencing thing or no thing? That is complete and utter perfection, untarnishable. You look at what's being experienced, the mental turmoil, let's say. That's being known by this utter clarity. And then you realise the two aren't separate. The clarity swallows up the turmoil, because the turmoil can't live within that clarity. Once it's seen from the perspective of the clarity, the turmoil can't carry on its life. Its life force has been taken away, because its life force is imagination, is belief in the stories. But when its life force is taken away by shining this radiant light on it, if you're shining the light of that experiential fact on the turmoil, and the turmoil seems to still be there, and you're getting upset, just then look into, well, is there some story I'm still believing in? Is there something I'm believing should happen here? There's some expectation, maybe. It's more that you just stay with what you are, and eventually everything else gets swallowed up by it. You kind of acclimate yourself with that perspective of what you really are, and everything can't help but get just integrated and swallowed up by that, because everything is the light. Truth prevails.
Yes. So when we say stay with what you are, we're not talking about you as two different things, like you, the subject, staying with a different subject. We're saying recognize that you are always as you are. Recognize that you are always that subjectivity, that pure subjectivity that births the sense of a separate subject and the sense of separation and the suffering. So stay with the staying with. Notice this fundamental noticing, which we could also call awareness. Become conscious of the fact you are conscious, or consciousness itself. We're not saying change your experience, transform into some higher version of yourself. You don't need to. You are always as you are, no matter what. We're talking about levels of zoom. That's just one way of talking about it. There's that clarity when you see content in context. Maybe there seems to be a lack of clarity when the content obscures the context that you are, the context of subjectivity. And then there's a discernment of the true nature of content when you zoom in experientially, that direct encounter with the very makeup, the very essence of any content, any experience, finding out that any experience can only be ever made of experiencing. So therefore, there is no subject and object divide. Can we even call it subjectivity when objectivity is seen as a story? But when it's recognized that there is no separation, then what do we call that? We call that recognition love. We call it peace, joy, contentment, and all the other qualities that we've spoken about that we all know so well. It's all of those qualities that we long for, that we seek in objective experience. It's disillusionment with this myth of duality, clear seeing. And you don't get rid of the separation, the distance between things. You don't knit everything together and then it's just one, and then that's enlightenment. You see that separation, that distance never was. While that objective experience convinces you, those qualities seem unreachable.
Yeah, absolutely. This is it's kind of, it's the misconception I feel a lot with this stuff, that we need, that the starting point is actually duality and we need to get to non-duality somehow. But actually the starting point is what's true, which is, you could call it non-duality, but it is what it is. It's this one fact of this expression of reality. There's a one fact here, and then it seems like there's duality within that. I always come back to dreams, but it seems like there's duality in dreams, doesn't it? Like, it seems like there's lots of things going on in dreams, and that's kind of, within a dream you might go, oh, I need to get back to non-duality, but that would be a mistake. You see the dream for what it actually is. You don't need to, nothing needs to change actually in a dream. Nothing needs to change. Interestingly, a lot of the dreams I've had where I've become lucid have been nightmares. And they've got so horrible that I've started to question what's going on, and I've become lucid. And so from that perspective, it's like, well, so what is a good thing? You know, what should I be trying to get to here? Because if we're sort of comparing seeing waking life clearly as to seeing dream life clearly, do I even have any idea what should, quote unquote, be happening right now? What's a good thing? What is a good thing to be happening? And the answer is no. There is no good thing. It's just for happening. So often our starting point is a seeming wanting to glue together of duality, get to non-duality, get this thing called non-duality, without realizing, first of all, that's the starting point, and the end point is non-duality. It never actually leaves itself. It just becomes this dream of duality, you could say, this imagination of duality. So just, you could see, firstly, where you believe you're in separation in some way. You just look into it that way, as opposed to trying to get something. You go, what's right here, right now? Is there separation here, right now? And if there does seem to be, then keep looking, because there's only one inconclusive conclusion, ultimately, and it's not separation. I can tell you that much. It is what it is. You can call it non-duality or oneness, but it's certainly not two-ness. It is like beyond anything we can say, but it is not separation. Have you imagined that you need to get somewhere? Because there is no starting point, because this never left itself, and there's no start and end. It's like, it's non-linear. So wherever you are, exactly where you are in any moment, it is always the same. And it's just kind of seeing that fact. There was a 2. I said 1, and there was a 2 to that one, but
that's because it's 1 without a second, Paul.
That's it. So first of all, there is only what we might call non-duality, but everyone has experienced it, and they just aren't aware of their clear seeings. You know, the experience of just where you've melted into the most beautiful scene you might see, like just an amazing sunset, or you see someone you absolutely love with all of your heart, just that moment of love, you just melted into a seeing where that mechanism is temporarily switched off. That mechanism that creates the apparent separation it's just temporarily shut down. The distortions came to an end temporarily.
Yeah, we often refer to dreams and lucid dreams because they do point to some of this, or it is a way of talking about this so-called waking state and the so-called waking up in the waking state. As a child, I had a lot of lucid dreams. Most of my dreams were lucid, and it doesn't necessarily change the dream character, but that dream character is seen to be part of the dream. Oh, I thought I was this sort of person. That was the dream. And then you realize, oh, well, I can continue acting as that dream character. That's inconsequential. But now I can enjoy a greater range of opportunities because it's a dream. Anything is possible. You're not bound to any kind of condition. Does the dream even need to change? No, the dream can play out, but there's an expansion of possibility.
Yeah, the limitations come off. It's not that everything changes or needs to change. It's just opens the possibility, like you say, to a totally different realm of experience. The chains of like this kind of robotic programmed mode is kind of set free. And it's not that everything ends. It doesn't end. In fact, I think this is a misconception, actually, that like there's some end. Oh, I woke up and that was it, and you can too. It's like, well, life didn't stop exploring itself, did it? It's just you're not taking yourself as that character. You know, that character is an expression, along with everything else, of what you are.